But hello. We're live now. I'm sorry we're late. We were trying to get on from Double House streaming. Talk to them. Introduce ourselves.
This is the MP Experience. Madam Posh is fixing the lights, an ongoing struggle. I'm Bound Mystic. Today, we'll be discussing sexy negotiations and consent. Yes, that's what we're doing.
Yes, start.
Yes.
That's better.
Oh, yes, here she is.
That's better. Here I am, rugged, worked. I got new rope. So, and
a
I
lot
have
of rope, very sturdy rope.
it's a thicker diameter.
Yes.
I haven't conditioned it yet, so you can see, but like you can see the difference in color right here between this rope is probably like what, 3, maybe 4 months old, maybe. Then this we just got on Sunday.
Yeah.
So yes, this is a live stream Q&A. We are going to be talking about sex negotiations. Okay, I'm going to have to move this rope because my hair is going to keep hitting it. It's going to bug the crap out of me.
I can probably move half of it on my side.
No, I can just squeeze it over.
Okay. Yeah.
There we go.
Ah, yes.
Yeah, I think that's better. Sorry. If you're not 18, there are other channels on YouTube where you can get content about kink, but please don't let it be on my channel. That is for your safety and for ours as adults. And you feel free to ask questions about anything, even if it's off topic. Rope dust. Even if it's off topic, it's totally fine. We just try to, we'll try to get through what we have planned, which is I don't have a really solid note plan for this live stream. I can say we're winging it, but we're not really winging it because even if I say I don't have a plan, I do have some sort of plan in my head.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we are going to wing it a little bit. But feel free to ask questions and we will answer them as we see them in the chat. What other things do I normally mention? Like, share, subscribe. You can follow me on all the social media stuff and scenes and blah, blah, blah. And if you'd like to get some more one-on-one like rope bondage coaching or just kinky lifestyle coaching, I am available for that as well. And you can book sessions on my website at the MP Experience. Let's see. Nolan Baptiste in the chat. What's up? Oh, he said, what's up to you specifically? How are you?
I'm doing well. Yes, I'm doing very well.
Let's do, before we get into the topic, we're going to do a little life update. We've been accepted to present at Snowbound, or not Snowbound. Wow, I really butchered that. Totally. We've already taught at Snowbound. Yeah. We've Chicago.
It's very exciting.
Very exciting. We're going to be teaching, I think, 2 classes.
Yes.
How do you like that for editing? Real time.
Yes.
Even though I don't really care about editing my cussing. Yeah. Okay, so yes, we have been asked to present at Craft Chicago it's in May, right? I think May.
Yes.
Yeah.
May.
My calendar is planned out that far, but my brain is not thinking that far ahead. My brain is not thought past the end of this month. And why is that?
Because we have a huge event in this month. Kink Educational Weekend.
Yes. Let's see, I'm testing you. I'm going to test you on this live stream.
Oh,
who are our presenters? Wait, who's our keynote?
Our keynote is Evie Lupine, fellow YouTuber.
Yes, and see if you can list all the other educators.
See, there's Naughty Bell, Shakti Bliss Bunny, Yum Panda, Worlds of Chaos.
2 left.
2 left.
Uh-huh.
See, I'm getting there.
Mm-hmm. Hopefully they're not watching.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I'm at a loss at the moment. I'm very bad with names. I forget my own name sometimes.
Miss Kim
Lee. Yes, Kim Lee. Yes.
And Magnolia Monroe.
Yes. I know. I was testing you.
Oh, you were testing me during your test? Don't think that's how that works. But as you can see, it's an all femme presenting lineup. I'm super excited about this event now that I've gotten more into the thick of the planning. I'm getting more and more excited. And today, I think you can check it out on my Instagram. I was vibing out playlist. And so there's probably some footage on my story if you go check it out. But yeah, I'm super excited for the event. There's 2 days of education, 18 class options. There's going to be a pet play room, place to take pictures, open labbing room during the day, intimate classes as well. That's the other thing too. Like in Seattle, hopefully not with the coronavirus, little baby event plan, looking out and helping me think of the things that are variables that I'm not paying attention to in the midst of my planning.
Yeah.
But then I also told him that I think, given that she's a YouTuber and that most YouTubers work from home, and then if you're also a YouTuber who works from home and who's also introverted, you might be able to self-contain a little bit.
So you're self-quarantined.
You're self-quarantined. Yeah. Like your communication with the public is already filtered.
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to talk about negotiations and consent. Mm-hmm. Why don't you give us a
foundation of every interaction that kinksters have with each other, whether it's just a quick little 20-minute session or your boundaries, what you hope for the other person, what you do, what you say, I'm not really prepared for. Often they're checklists. Checklists are useful because people have done this before. So it's no use try to reinvent the wheel. It's useful to get a checklist and, go, yeah, I like that. No, I don't like that. Maybe we can try this. But what makes it sexy, which is a part of this live stream, is that it, like you said, it was kind of like on a date.
Yes. And we're going to go over the basics foundation first, and then we'll get into the sexy part. So like, we're not going to give you the sexy right away.
Yes.
So I'm giving you a little shoulder, but not any vulnerable neck. Okay, men. You'll only get that if you really understand seduction and evolution in human people. The neck shows vulnerability. Okay, we'll go on a side note. Let's explain ourselves. If you're a woman, more of a submissive woman, and you're trying to seduce a man, the women have historically said that one of the seduction things, which I'm doing a whole video on this because there's like bullet points, I have a whole script, but one of them is about a vulnerable neck. And it goes all the way back to predator-prey type of situation, right? If you have a lion chasing an antelope and it wants to take it down, it goes for the neck. It needs a vulnerable neck. So a man looking for a mate likes to see a vulnerable neck. Does this make me more attractive?
So since you're the predator in this, do you look at my neck?
Yeah.
You do?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
But I don't think in the same connotation, because like I look at it like there's a vein popping there that I like to suck the blood out of.
Okay. Well, that's good to know.
then it makes it sexy. Oh. No, so I always make a joke about it because it's something that's commonly said in like cosmopolitan different things, and it is directly correlate if doesn't directly correlate if you're a femdom trying to look sexy. I wouldn't suggest vulnerable neck. Strong neck. Okay. So did you talk? I do want to put a little note in there as well. Which this sucks, but like I know for you guys watching the live stream, it sucks to have the internet going in and out, but we try to stop talking. It does so that on the replay, this makes sense.
Hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully. Hopefully that's the way it works. But tonight's live stream is being sponsored by the Kink Hub. The Kink Hub is a kink educational and event site that you can go to. You can post your events on there if you are an event producer. You can post your convention on there. There is more educational content, reading, blog, and that site is beginning to grow with more capabilities. And so their blogs that they've recently posted is kind of where we're getting some of the negotiation and consent information for tonight's live stream. And I also suggest, I think there's normally always a link in my description, I believe, for the Kink Hub. But I would highly suggest checking out their site and the events on their site. Right now, most of the events are going to be focused in Texas. So if you're in Texas, that's great. But we do want to branch out outside of Texas. And so feel free to reach out, especially to play, what toys will be used. What games we will play, what toys will be used, and we might have to be careful of who we play space. Maybe some people are allowed to watch, but they are not allowed to talk or interfere with the play. All of these questions should be answered during a negotiation. As more aspects, like we're going to do an impact play scene. One person thinks, or the place you're not supposed to hit. Instantly, problem. Miscommunication is the reason for most problems in the world, to be honest. However, no negotiation is perfect, so it is important to realize that there's always a chance that someone's boundaries may be overstepped. Or when that occurs, the event needs to be acknowledged, and acknowledged as soon as possible.
Yes.
The sooner you acknowledge it, the more accurate the memory hopefully is for you and that person. And then you also have a better conversation. You have more knowledge and your view of the facts accurately to base your conversation that you're about to have with this person. And there's always a scale of consent violations or consent incidents. An incident is going to be probably something lower on the scale where, again, it's this kind of miscommunication. A serious consent violation is going to be something that is, we're stepping in the illegal boundaries of abuse and
negligence. Yeah.
Not even just negligence. What is it called? Assault.
Yes.
Assault and battery or sexual assault. Yes. So something else that comes into negotiations is typically safe words. Safe words are exactly that. It's words you say to let people know where your play is at. I think most widely, the safe word system that is kind of used across the community is going to be the green light system, which is green, yellow, red. Green meaning everything's great. Yellow meaning, we should ease up there, or maybe we need to move to a different location, whatever else. Yellow normally means that you need more of an explanation. And red means I'm done. And as a top, you need to understand that so you can hear that, or if you're in places where you can't hear that, you can have nonverbal safe words or safe signals. And it's your responsibility to stop if you hear red when it's clearly communicated.
Yes.
And as a bottom, it's a good red flag to if you are negotiating with someone and they don't want to use safe words. There are definitely instances for not using safe words, but typically they come in dynamics, people who are in long-term dynamics and literally have negotiated no safe words and probably both know each other very well in and out of play.
Yeah.
99% of the time. Anything on that?
No, I did, in the description, I did like the idea of describing negotiations as defining your bound, like a sandbox.
Yeah.
I like that idea. Basically, all the toys get put in the sandbox. Toys you don't want in are kicked out. And so long as the top and the bottom know that this is the arena they can work in, there's so much to be done in that arena. And safe words are in a good place to, if we start getting too close to those boundaries, to let say, okay, get back into the middle of the play box. Yes,
and that's like what yellow would be when you start getting to the edge of those boundaries, and that's as a submissive or as the bottom. That's when you'd want to, oh, we're getting yellow, almost like a like a warning sign on an electric fence, like don't touch this. So that's a basic foundation for negotiations. We're going to get, when we get into we're going to talk about consent, then we're going to get into the sexy negotiation part, and that's going to be more of a demo of what that can look like. And so that should answer more questions about like, oh, now I'm going to say this. I don't like to, like I chose not to do this topic in a more edited video because consent negotiations is a topic that is like, you could do a whole convention on it.
Yeah.
Especially now with a lot of the progress that we've made in vanilla life, there are whole classes and like certifications or whatever else to get on consent culture training, because unfortunately we haven't been living in a proactive consent culture.
Yeah.
But the kink community strives to live by the standards of a proactively consent culture. And in the chat said, when my sub wears a gag, his safe word is to hum jingle bells into a skag. I like that. Yes, I like it. I like that a lot. That's a good idea. Like the humming. I didn't think of that because that's something that is, that is a good option too, that if you can't actually make words.
Yeah, Nolan Baptiste asks, can you use hand signals if you can't talk for safety? Yeah.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
Maybe this could be this is like a hand signal. If your hands are tied, maybe kicking your foot,
bringing your foot up.
Yeah.
I know sometimes, so maybe it's just closing a fist, like if you are in a harness and you just close your hands into a fist. I know I've heard some people that have done, used nonverbal safe words where like the bottom is holding something. And so all they have to do is drop it.
Yes.
Just let it go. And that's their red. And I think that's really effective too, because that's something you can still do in a heightened state of subspace.
Yeah.
So consent culture, what does that look like? Consent culture basically is no means no. You have the right to your own agency. You have the right to informed consent, which informed consent means you're aware of all of the risk. Nothing we're doing is safe. So we're not saying you're aware of being safe. It's not safe. Yeah. You're aware of the risk. And as DOMs, our job is to educate ourselves enough so we can eliminate as many risks as possible and lower the risk. We're never going to be risk-free. We're never going to be safe, but we want to keep the risk level as minimal as possible. So consent in the kink community applies in every aspect, from being in a shared space and helping somebody with maybe a tie, maybe a rope tie. Before you go help that person, help the top, tie that bottom, you would ask for consent to touch them.
Yeah.
Some people go as far as to ask for consent to like touch your rope because it's your items. And then you have every gray area in between that minimum to sexual content and sexual interactions and consent for that, right? Yeah. So I think in vanilla culture we very much have been pushing this consent culture when it comes to sexual activity, but in the kink community, consent culture applies to every type of interaction with a human being, especially if it involves human touch.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be a clinical, do you consent to me doing this every time you do something. There are definitely times that I have used what we use in vanilla life, which is implied nonverbal consent for touch or for, some sort of interaction. And that oftentimes looks like I've met someone new. We get to the hugging point in the community quick.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Because we're dealing in intimate spaces. So we can meet you at 2. And when you leave at 5, we are in a hugging space, right? But that is not for everyone. And many people have different reasons why they may not want to hug. So nonverbal hugging consent looks like this.
Yeah.
It doesn't, and can also be played off as funny. Oh, okay. And then even if they reject the hug, it doesn't necessarily look awkward because you're asking. Normally they're going to come back and be like, oh, and they're going to do whatever the other thing is, especially now with the coronavirus.
You may just be all doing the...
We may not need this consent rules anymore because no one's going to want to touch each other. But I think that's kind of, I found the best way. And even when again, I get rejected for a hug in that situation, which is really not a rejection of the hug. It's that person is not consenting to that interaction. And that's not a rejection of me as a person. That's their decision. And so I think sometimes because of how we've, lived in vanilla culture, we can take those things personally sometimes and not realize that like everyone has different touch policies and values, personal, how they want to be touched, when they want to be touched. And I think a lot of us have been, sometimes don't realize how much we've been touched and how much we're normalized the touch, and how much we didn't really like it. And I say that speaking from personally. I worked in the service industry for most of my life as an adult. And I've worked at every type of, from a family restaurant to Hooters. And yes, there's lots of types of touches that, and I'm sure this goes in many different industries, but specifically in the service industry, that you accept because they're tipping you, because they're the people who pay your paycheck.
Yeah. And
this is actually just tandem to a whole other issue that we're not going to talk about. But like, this is why actually the service industry has some of the highest non-reported sexual harassment situations in the entire thing, because more than 70% of servers are women and more than 70% of managers are men. And these are work situations that are not regulated, where there's alcohol and many different situations. The manager makes your schedule. So if he sees an extra tit, maybe he makes a better schedule. Like, that's how these places are ran, and it's shitty. It needs to change. So vote for Bernie. Okay, that's my rant about that. But it was interesting once I got into the community, that kind of adjustment of consent culture, and then realizing, oh, what is my personal value for touch? Because I have definitely had situations where I've been touched and been like, why are you touching me? And then I know that there's some situations I probably should have been more verbal in that situation, but I let things happen again because they were probably going to be tipping me. Okay. And that's another thing in that industry as well, is that's also encouraged to make tips, which is why that shouldn't be your only source of income working there. You should have a minimum wage. Okay, that's enough ranting about that. But so consent, again, it can be as simple as needing to consent. Like if you're doing an impact play scene, I would get consent for every toy you're going to use. I've been in the middle of a scene and realized in the middle of a rope scene and realized that we forgot to talk about consent for pictures before we got in the scene. Sucks. I've been in scenes where we didn't discuss being tickled or getting some impact during the rope. And in the middle of the scene, the bottom's like, no, that's too, and it's totally cool. And it's been bottoms that I've done impact with before, that I play with often. And I'd be like, but you didn't negotiate that, and you're in a headspace now. And although that may seem annoying, that is for your own safety as a top as well.
Yeah, because a sub or a bottom, when they get into that subspace, or even if they're not in full headspace, they're just like feeling the vibes and all that. You have to treat it like intoxication, because essentially your chemicals in the brain are basically intoxicating you. Sometimes their judgment is not so great, and when you get out of the scene, you regret what you did, and all of a sudden, you're in a predicament.
Just like a contract, you can't sign a contract. Like a contract is void if they can prove at the time that you weren't in your right mind to sign it, right? Same kind of thing.
Yeah.
And being in subspace is not in your right mind. And you cannot sit there. You cannot, as a top, say, well, they could renegotiate because they were bottoming in the scene, but they weren't technically in subspace. Nope. That's not, don't do that. Like, don't even float those lines as a top. We had a rope group this weekend, and we had a panel of riggers that were kind of discussing different things. And one thing I really appreciated that one of the riggers brought up that doesn't get talked about a lot in this community, which I'm actually probably going to do a video on it now, that he mentioned it in that environment. I feel safe talking about it. But people don't talk enough about how much social capital is a really big deal in this community. And as a top, it keeps you in the community or not in the community. And that means having bottoms that have had good experiences that express those things and not violating people's consent that wasn't decided on before. And whereas you may feel like in the moment you might be missing out on an opportunity of a space, it's worth it to miss out on that opportunity, to not have the opportunity for you to maybe be banned possibly from your entire community in the city where you live, because you wanted to, use a flogger instead of a paddle.
And also, not negotiating in the middle of a scene helps you the other way around, because even though that sub may say, the sub may have really wanted that additional stuff, but after the scene is done, they'll tell their friends, hey, we did a scene, I really wanted this, but because we didn't negotiate it, the top refused to do that. That only makes the top look good with other people, because other people say, wow, that's
bonus social capital.
Yeah, that person is really safe.
Yeah. You are never going to lose capital for being too safe.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. And if you do, it will be with people who don't matter.
Yeah.
That's the truth, because if you lose social capital for being safe with someone, that person's priorities are whack.
Yeah.
Right? Because that should always be a priority, is safety. And although I think there is an aspect of that also lays on submissives, especially submissives that are well known or play a lot within the community, it's not as heavy as it is on dominants, because submissives, it's just you're receiving things. Dominants need to know skills to do things. And if someone gets hurt, most of the time it's going to be our fault. Now, there are some situations in which in scenes in which bottoms can do something that can cause themselves to get hurt. But most of the time, if someone gets hurt, it's going to be our responsibility. And so you don't want those things floating around. And then also, if one of those things does happen, you want to deal with it in the most mature way. You want to take 100% responsibility and try to not only verbally say, but show within your actions the process towards restorative justice, even if your community doesn't have an active process for you or procedure for you to go through. Don't show up in the spaces you're banned from. Try to find people, reach out to people in the community and be like, hey, I made this mistake. I realize I made this mistake, and I'm trying to, I've introspectively looked at myself and I want to grow. What steps would I need to do to potentially be, allowed back in these spaces within the time frame that you guys set, right? Although restorative justice is a thing, it's not on your schedule. It's based on other people seeing the work. So you can't restorative justice in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
3 weeks is not a changed human being.
But being on, if you make a mistake as a top, the sooner you address it, ideally right when it happened, the better. Because two things. One, the longer the bottom sits with that mistake, the more they'll create indignation, the more they'll have resentment, they'll hold a grudge against you. Addressing it as soon as possible, they'll say, okay, the emotions haven't set in, you'll be able to explain, okay, this is where I made a mistake. They can see, instead of having the resentment, say, okay, there's forgiveness.
There's more opportunity for forgiveness too. And say, hey, I am so sorry. I realized, which is why I stopped using it, but I realized 2 impacts in that we hadn't negotiated that toy and that violated your consent. And I realized it immediately and didn't use it anymore. And I want to address it right away.
Yeah.
not in their after headspace. Let me make a disclaimer. After the scene, after they've come back to their normal resting headspace of normal life, address it that way. Bonus points.
Yes.
That will give you bonus points, especially if it's an issue like that. Now, if it's an issue where you have violated someone sexually, I don't think that's something. One, if you've done that, you probably are not going to admit it right after the scene, but that's a different situation. I will say this, though. I did a scene recently where it wasn't that I was reaching for anything. I actually consciously did like an OBGYN doctor like through where like my back of my hand was to all the good parts like this and went like this, went all the way through and then went on the other side of her leg like this and back through. And it was someone that I've played with many times. We've done different things together and she thought it was funny. But that's how particular I am about being safe, that like there's not even the opportunity that me accidentally brushing against something would be considered a consent violation. And when I negotiate like rope scenes and pickup rope scenes, I normally negotiate in I forget exactly how they call it, but in an inclusive way, meaning we only talk about the things that we're going to do. And if we don't talk about it, it's not on the table. And so it will be like, we're going to do rope. If they want to know the outline of what we're going to do, I'm going to give them that. And I have this kind of, disclaimer in my negotiations that like, I am only going to touch you in ways in which I need to touch you to tie the rope, which means we're not doing any sensation play. We're not doing any impact, like nothing else is on the table other than tying this rope into the suspension that we've talked about. And I find that helps me. That's helped a lot in my negotiations because like nothing else is on the table. The other thing that also helps a lot with my negotiations and consent is that no sexual play is pretty much ever on the table for pickup play. Yeah. Meaning, I mean, not that I do a lot of sexual play anyways with a lot of different people, but like if it's a pickup scene and you want to do impact play and you like to be spanked until you come, I'm probably going to tell you no. Most play that I do that's pickup play is transactional, non-sexual BDSM play. And so to go to that next level, we need to be on that next level more than just in a fetish way for me. And that's partly for me personally, but then that's partly like just kind of my safety protocols. I will admit that in the beginning, I was a little naive and was like, I don't understand why there's so many consent violations. Like, why would you be touching a boob if you're like doing an impact scene? You know what I'm saying? Like, I thought because I came from a place of being like, we're only negotiating for non-sexual, like, I didn't even know that was an option to negotiate for sexual play, just random pickup play at a dungeon. Like that's the headspace I was in from the beginning, which was good for me. And then when I became more aware of it, I was like, oh, we're just going to stay in that headspace. Yeah. Okay, so we are going to negotiate.
Oh, yes, that sounds nice.
Okay. We'll do a couple scenarios. First scenario, we are at a spanking party and we're going to negotiate an impact scene.
Okay.
So we're going to do an impact scene. How much experience with impact do you have?
I've played with a couple of other people, their hands.
And what of those toys would you feel comfortable with me using tonight?
All of them.
All of them?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So that was paddles, canes,
hands.
Paddles, canes, and hands. Would you say that how would you say that you play on a scale? Do you say that you like a stingy, fuddy? Do you like to play hard, lighter?
In the middle.
In the middle? Do you prefer to have a warm up?
Sure.
Yeah. And during this scene, I'm only going to do impact on your butt. I'm assuming that we're only talking about that and not full body impact, correct?
I do like my legs hit too.
Okay, so I can hit the butt and the legs.
Mm-hmm.
And there's not any other type of play that we're going to do during this scene. Or is there any other thing that you would like to incorporate?
Yeah, we can do that for right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to do some impact play on your butt and your legs. I can use canes, paddles, and my hands.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not going to play with anything else. And that's the only type of fetish we're going to do. Does that sound good with you?
That sounds good.
Do you have any questions for me, or anything that you want to get consent for me?
Well, no, I've seen you play with a few other people, so
that's good.
That's why I chose you.
Oh, I've been chosen.
Yes.
We're going to do this scene and cut. Okay, so that was just like a very basic negotiations. I covered any past health issues. I covered any injuries. I covered exactly where we're going to do the impact play and exactly what toys we're going to use.
She went to get some papers.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Pause.
Yes.
Okay, so now we're gonna
a full.
Yes,
okay.
We've got our checklist. We are in a romantic relationship. And we're gonna ball.
Probably not my ball.
Okay, so you shouldn't say nowhere,
yes,
right?
That's true.
Well, what I mentioned is it's kind of hard to make this sexy with the internet going in and out. But okay, what about eye contact restrictions? Do you think you consent to eye contact restrictions?
Well, I mean, I like looking at you, and you have beautiful eyes. Yeah. But if you make me look down, it'll. No, I hope you.
Oh, you hope I don't?
Yeah.
Yeah. But do you consent if I do?
I do consent, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Low jobs. Do you consent jobs?
I do consent to that, yes. There goes the age restriction right there.
I'm sorry. I know you guys probably are like, this isn't sexy. And I'm like, yeah, but this is kind of my sexy. Like, that is totally something I would do when I'm like trying to be like seductive. And I think also because we've done this before and we're on camera, it may be hard to be as sexual as sexy as we normally would be. What about face slapping? Do you consent to that?
If it's light.
If it's light, like this?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's okay.
And if it's not done in a degrading way.
Okay, so you like to get slapped in a celebratory way?
Yeah, in a sexy way. Yeah.
That was such a good job. You're so sexy.
Maybe not.
I like light face slaps in a sexual, sensual way. Okay, what about exhibitionism? Can I take all your clothes off in front of people?
Yes, actually.
Yes?
Yeah.
Yeah, whenever I want to?
In a dungeon or around, people in the kink community.
Yeah, he caught me there.
Yeah,
no whatevers. No broad statements of saying, yeah, you can do whatever like that. No, you should always have restrictions.
Yeah.
Let's see. What about leaving marks? Can I leave marks?
Yes.
Yes.
So long as they're not like permanent marks. I like
anywhere?
Except my eyeball.
Okay, so it's okay if they're possibly visible?
Yes.
In your clothes?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Oh, we're getting close in time.
Mhm.
So the point of showing that is that negotiations doesn't have to look like, all right, chastity, 1 through 5, go.
0.
Like, it also doesn't have to be like, here's your paper. Okay, go over to your side of the house.
And just fill it out and then exchange it at the end.
Don't do that either, because here's the other thing. Let's do, how about this? Pretend you don't know what this is.
Mm-hmm.
Abrasion.
If I don't know what it is, I can't discuss it. So I'm just going to have to choose 0 since I don't know what it is, and then discover that, hey, later on, I should have said yeah.
Yeah, like you might think abrasion means like scratching or something like that. And then on the audience, so then when you go to play, the internet goes out. That's what happens when you don't communicate correctly.
Yes.
When you go to play, then you actually have consent issues and problems.
Yeah, because what happens is that you both consented something to be in the sandbox in the play area, and all of a sudden
they're in 2 different sandboxes.
Exactly.
And your vagina's on fire because you just scrubbed it with a sandpaper. And you thought he was gonna use his nails on your back. So again, that's why it's good to do this together and make it a night. And this is what I'm talking more about, a play partner, when you're making more of kind of a dynamic, whether it's a romantic dynamic, a sexual dynamic, whatever else. You can make it sexy, you can make it fun. Again, I think even though people would probably look at that negotiation and be like, that doesn't look very sexy, it is for us. Mm-hmm. We're connecting. Laughter is a big part of every aspect of my life. Mm-hmm. And it is in sex too. I have had some sexy moments that have been freaking hilarious that I remember to this day. Okay, I'm gonna share one because it's just really funny. So when I married my high school sweetheart right out of high school, and so we're 18 and 20, living in our own apartment, having all the freedom and the fun, right? And so one night, he wanted to put whipped cream on my breast and then lick it off. Mm-hmm. I think whatever that high school football movie that scene was in had come out right around then. I forget the name of the movie, but I'm sure that's where I got the idea from. So I go to the couch and I had like fancy panties on and I was topless and I'm like laying out and he's got the whipped cream and we've already like made out. We're in a sexual mood and he goes to put the whipped cream, like spray the whipped cream. And like, I don't know if the can was bad or he didn't shake it enough, but it just goes like all over my face, like all over there's just whipped cream whiteness, like splashed all over the couch, like just everywhere. And like, we literally were on the floor crying, like laughing until we were crying for a good 10 minutes. And when we went and had really good sex after I went to a shower and cleaned it off. He didn't lick it off. It was too many places. And by the time we stopped laughing, it was so sticky.
Sticky, yes. Whipped cream is sticky.
It was very white, though. That's like, it's a different experience when you're this dark and that happens. And then when it explodes, it was like, I was like, inside, I was like, this was supposed to happen later. I hadn't prepared my eyes. Anyways, so sexy can still be erotic because we still got it on after that. So let me check the chat for some last questions.
And one thing while she's checking that, I'm just looking at this. I'm not sure if this is ours or not, but it's always good to review it because as time goes on, you discovered new things. And,
this isn't ours.
Oh, yeah. So you discover new things that you thought were limits. You said, well, I'm open to that now. And the more you get to know the other person, the more you become open to certain things.
Yeah.
So, and that's always good to review. And, and sometimes it's like micro negotiation changes, like, you don't have to review.
And sometimes it's not even like, it doesn't have to be a a said productive productive conversation. It's just, hey, last time we did that scene, you put rope around my balls, and I don't like that. I like all the other things around, but the rope doesn't feel right. So maybe we just take that one off. Or you go, hey, this other scene, you pinched me one time on the nutsack, and it was like, oh, I don't know, whatever you guys do, and that's great. And then they're like, oh, okay, well now we can put that as a 10. It used to be a 1.
Yeah.
So it can work both ways. And you learn to, as you get into your relationship, that a kinky power exchange, whether it's a full-blown romantic relationship or just a play partner, is always in constant negotiations, especially if those partners are new. I would suggest that your subs watch my series on how to find a mistress that's coming out this month during a 45-minute or 30 and how to create realistic expectations. I think it all has to do with, like, there's not an overall way. There's not an overall arching way on how to, like, be sexy during your negotiations that works for everyone, because what is sexy to people is different. I know, like, as women, right, we read all the cosmopolitan books of showing our neck to try to be sexy. But oftentimes, the men that we end up in relationships with, the times that they find us the most sexy is when we're, like, no makeup and we're laughing and, like, there's, like, genuine joy coming from us and, whatever else. That's oftentimes the time that they see you the sexiest. And it's not when you're, like, duck lipping and your tits are up. And it's, like, they do find that sexy. But, like, the connective sexy moments aren't necessarily what traditionally is deemed as sexy.
And and also it depends on I'm not sure exactly what kind of subs are these full-time subs or just play partner subs, and it's probably easier to be the more fierce if you're just having people in a scene by scene basis. I think if you're in a longer term relationship, you actually want a romantic thing, then that'll hopefully change, because I mean I couldn't imagine keeping up a persona for more than a day.
Of who you of someone that you're not.
Yeah.
And, like, checklist, again, like, I suggest checklist for dynamics, right? So for play partners, and play partners doesn't necessarily mean that you have a power exchange. It just means we are considered play partners. It's like a friendship, and we play together, and we're putting a title on it, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't mean they're in a romantic relationship. Doesn't necessarily mean they're fucking. Doesn't mean any of those things. Means they're play partners. That's still considered a dynamic, and whether there's a power exchange in it or not. And that is a good thing to use a checklist for. Anything that involves a continuous relationship going on, a checklist is a good thing to use for it. Now, when you're doing pickup play, there are actually, like, mini, like, pickup play checklists. Excuse me. So you can hit all the important parts and then do just your inclusive, like, we're only adding these things into the sandbox. Or you can do it more organically, like we showed. The goal with tonight is to show that it doesn't have to look like you're going to the doctor's office and you're trying to check off your family's medical history. Like, it doesn't have to be sterile like that. Like, it can be, excuse me. Oh gosh, I shouldn't be coughing on YouTube. I don't have corona, okay? Corona is what'd you say? It was a dry cough.
Yes, a dry, unproductive cough.
Okay, I have, that's not how it would take you out either.
Oh, that's true.
I have a phlegmy allergy cough. So disclaimer of, but everybody's different, and, so some people might not find that sexy. I think you could also make scene like a negotiation, like a scene, right? You don't have to touch each other, you don't have to be degrading, but you can still be, like, fierce. You could be in, like, your full dom outfit. He could be sitting, kneeling on the floor, which is basic things you can consent to, just, like, right there. Like, I would like to do this this negotiation scene, and do you consent to these 3 things we're going to do in this scene as we do these negotiations? And then you can make it, like, I don't know, have a ruler, make it very teacher. Have a chalkboard where you've written out, like, yes, no, whatever else. Like, you can play with it however. And I think that was kind of the point of what we're trying to express in this live stream is that it just doesn't have to be as clinical, and you can kind of customize it for what works for you and the person that you're negotiating with. Maybe it's a 4-way negotiation because it's about to be a poly dynamic and there's multiple power exchanges, and you're doing it like a game show on a dinner night, like where everyone's come over and everyone's got cards and they're going to pick one and be like, ass fucking, do we consent? Yes, no, yeah, okay, like make it fun. I don't know. I think anything really generically vanilla mixed with kink stuff just immediately is fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think too, Anne went on to say, I want, maybe I just feel worried about how to pull off both, like being romantic and still being dominant. And I think, again, this goes back to our kind of vanilla, our perspective, or our what we view is dominant. Mm-hmm. You are dominant, however you are as a human. Mm-hmm. There are more reclusive dominant people. Mm-hmm. There are more passively dominant people, right? Dominance.
Yeah.
Not every dominant is mean, yelling, and just super disciplined. Like, not every dominant's like that. Like, there's laid back beach bum dominance. Like, there's and then there's relationships that go in between. Like we have spaces where we're more relaxed. We have spaces where we're in higher protocol. There's times where we're just joking around. Like when we're private, like he's savage. Like we give it to each other. Like our friends have started to notice about how like he's so good in this space. And then when you guys are alone in a safe space, he's savage. And I'm like, yeah, I know, but I like it. That's part of our relationship. I would be bored if it wasn't there, or I'd feel horrible because I'm giving it to him. So it's good that we can play back and forth. And that's part of our dynamic because our relationship is more than just our kink.
Yeah.
And so I think that's really important too. And that's, I talk about that in like creating a Dom persona of be the person that you feel comfortable being 100% in that role. And sometimes that's exactly who you are. And sometimes that's a little bit of an exaggerated version of who you are. But that's the fun part of this, is that there's some role play, there's some role play in it. You can, when I go to my pro dom sessions, I'm way more glammed out and, a little pretentious and have a little bit more of an air about me, because that's what I need to do in that space, for that scene. But in the community, we don't do really high protocol when we go to events in the community. I joke alone sometimes that like the other femdoms would probably be disappointed in me if they saw the shit he got away with privately. But again, it's what works for your dynamic. And if at some point I decide that I want to like get a little stricter about things, I communicate that, make sure he consents to that, and then we start practice or training down that direction.
Yeah. And if you're someone who's truly submissive, you can feed off their submissive side. Basically, they're creating the space for you, which you can step in. You don't have to push your way in. If they're submissive, then they're kind of already giving you that power exchange already. You just hold on and you don't have to take. It's kind of already there. But maybe that's just us. I'm not sure.
Everyone's different.
Yeah, everyone's different. Yeah.
So Nolan Baptiste said, I love it how my dominant handcuffed me for any situation. That's interesting. Like, I think there's something to be said too for like, even when you decide to like communicate rules or set protocol, like you can make those scenes too. You can put them in a predicament and make them repeat back the protocols that you're giving them while they're having to like hold this thing, while their foot's in this, whatever else. Like, you can make those very interactive and fun. And incorporating them in scenes sometimes like that connects a feeling or emotion or physical feeling to it and can sometimes help them remember.
Yeah.
Jerome Chi said, have you stepped on someone's face and forced them to consent? No. I can't force consent. Then it's not consent.
Yeah.
That like forcing someone to consent is not consent. That like sentence
Yeah, that's
doesn't
coercion.
make sense. Yeah, like that's a fancy way of saying coercion.
Yeah.
I've had this issue with clients as well too, where they want to be forced into slavery, and not understanding that even forced slavery is consented to by those adults. Anything that you see that says forced even in a checklist is forced in the idea that it might be aggressive, it might be viewed as forced mentally in their head, but it's consented to because it's on the checklist as forced blowjob. You know what I'm saying? So they're still consenting to it. So it's not coercion. But if you just force someone to give you a blowjob without them consenting to forced blowjob, then that's rape. I don't know why I have to make that disclaimer, but that's what that is. So, and that's why we're explaining consent.
Yeah.
That's consent culture.
Yeah.
Now that being said, if you want to like do a scene where you're forced to do something like that, that's a valid headspace to want to like. That's totally valid.
Yeah. Like for instance, if you already consented in advance to do coercive things,
yes,
then the coercion's not. It's what's called consent, non-consent kind of thing.
Yes.
Basically, like if you already know that he consented to having a foot on his face and consented to reciting "Mary Had a Little Lamb," you could put your foot on his face and make him recite the poem, and that works for
like blackmail situations or interrogation situations where they're
the internet.
We're almost
done. It doesn't match what you've negotiated. The safe word is a way of basically saying, okay, this is not what we had or not what I had in mind.
Yeah, and that's a good point to point out. Like, you don't just use a safe word when it becomes too much. You also use your safe word when someone's doing something you didn't consent to.
Yeah.
And if that doesn't make them stop, then that's the time to get out of that situation.
Yes.
And I hope you're not in bondage without a bondage buddy.
Yeah.
That's what we're gonna call them, bondage buddies.
That's cool.
Yes. Did you take a bondage buddy? She could have helped you.
Yep.
And disclaimer at the same time, I am not saying that where I am blaming or shaming victims. Not saying that. I'm just saying that if we have the knowledge to be aware to not put ourselves in risky situations, we should not do that.
Yeah.
Separately from that.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think we got through all the questions and we are over an hour. And your alarm's going to go off in a few minutes.
Yeah.
For him to go to work. And I have some more work I have to get done tonight. So yeah, we're going to head off the stream. Thank you everyone who, like, I'm surprised that we even got up to like 10 people watching, even with the internet issues. Even talking about negotiations and consent, which is not the sexiest, it's the least sexiest topic in kink, and actually the one that is really hard to educate on because nobody wants to go to those classes because it doesn't sound like fun. But in person, I actually have in my curriculum, I have a class that's called Sex Negotiations, Sex Communication, Sex Consent. And in that class, it's a much bigger deep dive and demos and stuff like that on how to make your negotiations sexier and more fun. So if you happen to be able to see me at any of the places I'm educating at this year, maybe you'll see that class. And then maybe we'll do a more in-depth one for Patreon in the future. All right. Follow the MP Experience and Madam Posh on social media. Like, subscribe, and share to the channel. Sorry, I'm supposed to be smiling when I say these because that makes me more engaged and you want to do the things more, right? Follow my Patreon or subscribe to my Patreon. There's multiple subscription levels. We do scenes together. And if you'd like to get more lifestyle coaching or rope bondage coaching advice from myself, you can follow me on my app. See, I'm not good at this. All right, back in character. You can go to my website at thempexperience.com. Can I do good commercials?
Yeah.
And check out DFW Kink Education to get your tickets to the event at the end of March, DFW Q 2020 weekend. I am super excited. I'm sure you'll hear a little bit more about it on next week's live stream. We will have a live stream next week. We will have a live stream next week. It's on Japanese rope bondage history.
Oh, that sounds like fun.
I know it should, because you have to make notes for it.
Oh.
And then that will be the last live stream for this month, because I will be in full-blown event producer mode. You will still be getting videos on Tuesday. They will just not be live streams. And then we will be back with the live stream the first Tuesday in April. No, second Tuesday in April. We're still going to be recovering first Tuesday in April. Second Tuesday in April, which will be a rehab, recovery, catch-up live stream right when we get back from Oklahoma Leather Fest.
We'll be very busy.
That live stream, we're literally telling you about like the second to next live stream, which is over a month away, because that's how busy the next 3 to 4 weeks are about to be.
Yeah.
Yes, please check that out. I think I gave all the announcements. Hopefully you liked my fun newscaster voice.
It was cute.
It's cute.
Yeah.
My customer service voice, let's be honest. If I was waiting tables, that's what I sounded like. Thank you so much for watching. This has been Madam Posh and
Bound Mystic
with the MP Experience. We will see you next week in the live stream, and hopefully you enjoy the content that I have pre-prepared and have pre-planned for you, because I'm ahead of the game. Awkwardly ending the stream. You guys have a great week. Happy kinking. Do some rope, practice your single columns, communicate with your partner, because it's sexy. Yeah.